Welcome back, everyone, to the Comics Cube. Today, I sit down with one of the biggest Jane Foster Thor fans, Rosalind Moses.
What's up? What's up,
And-
everybody?
And we're going to count down the 10 best Thor moments from the Jason Aaron run.
So exciting.
Hey, Roz.
Hey,
How you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you. I've got my tea. I've got my Thor t-shirt. We're all set.
We're all set. Which Jane Foster means a lot to you, right? Is she your
Definitely.
favorite superhero at this point?
Yeah, basically, it's not Thor is my. I tell people Thor is my favorite superhero, and they often assume that I'm talking about Dude Thor, but I am definitely talking about Jane.
Oh, Dude Thor is what you call him. I've been calling him Man Thor.
Yeah, I call him original flavored Dude Thor. But yeah, I do call her Jane Thor on Twitter as a distinction, or elsewhere, just so that people know which Thor I'm talking about. But personally, yeah, Jane's my favorite, absolute favorite at this point.
What did it mean to you to see her lift the hammer?
Well, in the build-up, I was so sure it was her, and I was so sure that it was Jane because I'd actually I read a Jason Aaron interview saying that the candidate is a woman who's a legacy character, and I was so sure it was Jane. And when we saw this mysterious woman lift it up, I thought that was it. Just it's so good. The art is incredible. It's beautiful. But when it was revealed to be Jane, I was like, yeah, of course it is Jane. I knew it all along. Of course it is. And it felt vindicating, it felt validating, and I felt like this character who's been around since the 60s, been an also ran, been called boring, a damsel in distress, and now she's Thor. It felt really good. It's probably one of the happiest comic book related moments of my life.
Now what we're going to do is we're going to count down we're going to basically pick 10 moments from Jason Aaron's Thor run. So Roz going to go first, then I'm going to go, then Roz going to go until we get to 10. All right. What is your first pick?
First pick. Well, this was tricky, but I'm going to go with Thor versus Odin, which is Jane finally being confronted by Odin, or no, she confronts Odin, and then they fight it out and duke it out across the entire solar system, going through going through planets, going through asteroids, and she's saying to him, I was once in love with a man who used to hold this hammer, and we could have ended up spending our lives together were it not for you, the All-Father. And then she drops an asteroid on his head. I remember when that first happened, I was like, yeah, get him, Jane. Just beat the shit out of him. Kick that old man's ass. And it felt really vindicating. Like, I've never liked Odin. I always thought he was a dick, but it's really
he's
great.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Odin is Thor's #1 villain.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, I mean, maybe he's always been particularly mean to Jane, and maybe understandably so, but that didn't make it any less satisfying when Jane drops a big old rock on his face and then just proceeds to punch him through rocks and a planet and the moon. It's just like, yeah, get him, get him, Jane. I'm only sad she can't do it in the MCU now because he dared.
Because he's dead, yeah.
Yeah. He died way too peacefully for my liking.
Oh, no, yeah.
Yeah.
And even in the MCU, it's kind of just revealed that wow, Odin's a dick.
Yeah, he was, and even like I always thought he was a dick just because of him treating Jane like that. But it turns out he was also a kind of a mass murderer and a colonizer. Like, oh, wow, okay,
and
makes
a
sense.
Revisionist of history.
Yes, yeah. Propagandist.
That fight that you mentioned actually has one of my favorite lines in the entire series, which is Odin goes, "Today death comes for the one who would be Thor," and she answers back with, "Today my hammer comes for your
Just for your
face."
face. She does get a lot of great lines like that. I think, one of my other moments involves the line, "Thus begins the kicking of thine hindquarters."
My going to my first pick. So this is pick number 2. It's the one from issue number 12, where Thor Odinson takes Jane, who finds out, who we just now learn has cancer. He takes her to the moon, and then they start talking about how to deal with her cancer. She's talking about how if you solve this for me magically, I'm going to go out with Hercules.
Yeah. Oh, that
But,
moment.
but
Yes, I love that.
but the moment that makes it for me is like, because I still read comics in print. You get to the end of one page and she's going, "Why don't you go find another Earth girlfriend?" And he goes, "Well, I tried, but you'll forgive me for saying this, my last Earth girlfriend." Then you turn the page and it's that shot of the Earth and it's the two of them. And he goes, "My last
Yeah.
Earth girlfriend was magical, or it was breathtaking."
Taking. Yeah. Oh my God. Yes. That came out in 2013, like shortly after Thor: The Dark World came out, and I remember reading it thinking, "Oh God, they're going to kill her off in the most." She's got cancer. Of course, she has cancer. Like, I didn't think it would lead to this. But yeah, I remember reading that, just hit me right in the feels. I think I actually welled up when I first read that. That's a good moment.
It's a great moment.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Oh
and
my
it,
God.
it it showcases their relationship too. They might not be together anymore, but you can tell they still love each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're very. I think he regrets how things ended. That he might have been able to do more, but too much time and too much loss has happened for them to really make it again. But they still very much love each other, which will be another one of my favorite moments later on.
Okay, your turn. Number 3.
Okay, number 3. The it's really hard because the series has just yielded so many good moments, but another verse is her fighting Loki
Oh,
very
that's
early
so
on.
good.
Yeah, where he's like, I know we've done this dance so many times before. Don't you trust me? And she just whacks him with the hammer so hard that his head flies from his shoulders because she does not trust. She has no reason to trust him at all. Every time, she's always just been a pawn in him trying to get to Thor. She's just like, she just whacks him, no words, just a scream, and just hits him so hard that his head comes off. Just like, yeah, I like that. I think at the time a lot of Loki stands were really angry about it. I was like, oh, I like it even more now because I understand why he's popular, but I don't like it. But yes, and also when his head flies off, he just sighs, just like, okay. And then proceeds to fight him in his many aspects as well. Just and yeah, she throws the hammer and just says, "Find the real one," and it lands on a snake. That's kind of.
Yeah,
I
that's
was like, yeah,
perfect. I
yeah, that
think
was a good fight.
also another thing that makes that even more powerful is the fact that it's the first time we see Loki in this whole run.
Hmm.
We
Yeah,
don't see Loki at all until he meets Thor as Jane as Thor.
yeah, and he can tell that he's like, well, maybe I can, because I think maybe it's implied that he suspects that this is Thor, his brother, in a new form. So he's just going to try, maybe if he see if he can manipulate her. And she's like, nope, no, not a chance. And he knows that he can't use his usual "brother, help me" tactics on this one because it's not his brother, and she knows better than most how Loki operates. They actually address that in the beginning of that issue, where she's just like, "My dad always told me that if a man can't makes you uncomfortable with just a smile, that man is not to be. That man is really dangerous, and he can just, oh yeah, punch that guy. Oh man, it's so good. And yeah, and you can tell Russell Dauterman has said that he's drawn, like, he watched videos of Tom Hiddleston walking, so you can, and watched his face, and paid really and you can tell because he
looks like Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah, he looks exactly like a younger Tom Hiddleston, like Tom Hiddleston before he got famous and before Thor, when he was younger. But it is definitely Tom Hiddleston, and he also clearly bases Jane on Natalie Portman. She even has the beauty marks on her face in her human form. Like, yeah, we see you, Russell. You're not slick.
So you're talking about Russell Dauterman. So for my fourth pick, for the pick number 4, I will actually pick a moment drawn by Esad Ribic.
Oh yeah,
because this is a moment that kind of resonates with another moment that I would like to pick later on if you don't get to it.
Yeah.
It's very early on. So Jane's not in it, but it's when the 3 Thors jump out of the ship to fight Gorr the God Butcher, and the narration is just, then struck Thor with the fury of a billion storms. And there's something about these artists on this run where they're perfect for every story arc that they were chosen for. Like Esad Ribic was perfect for that Thor Odinson stretch. Russell Dauterman was perfect for that Jane Foster stretch, and War of the Realms at the end of it.
Yeah.
A perfect mix of art and writing in this. In this run.
All the artists they've picked have just been absolutely gold. Even like for a while, for a bit of the War Thor part of the saga, somebody else took over. I'll just look it up who it was, because it wasn't Russell Dauterman for a while.
Mike Del Mundo.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. He's really good for that particular moment. It's just the art on this whole run has just been gold. Even on the annuals where they got like Marguerite Savage and I can't remember the other 2, but that Noel Stevenson short story is great.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah.
The one with the annual, the one in the
I
think I remember that one.
Yeah, it kind of did the rounds on because Thor's got a lot of lesbian fans, and they were like, "Oh my god, Jane makes out with this lady," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's written by Noel Stevenson." What? Of course it is. Yeah, of course it's written by Noel Stevenson. Sorry.
Noel Stevenson is great. Like, I love her work, and I love She-Ra. I love new She-Ra. I just binged it like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I really hope. I mean, I don't know if she will. I hope she gets to write another Jane Thor story. Maybe they'll do one when Love and Thunder comes out. But she absolutely excelled at it. So yeah. Well, we'll see. But yes.
All right, your turn. Pick number 5.
Ooh, very early on in the second, like we had the Thor run, and then the Mighty Thor, which is after we found out it was Jane. And it's the opening of the first issue of that run where she's getting her chemo, and she's just like, right, I'm Dr. Jane Foster, and believe it or not, I'm also the Mighty Thor. So right now, I'm not feeling particularly mighty right now. I'm just trying not to die. And she's weak and cold, and she describes the process of getting chemotherapy, and it's really visceral and kind of heartbreaking to read, and she's just so scrunched up and tiny, and that is contrasted so much with like she just gets up, she abandons her chemo to go and fight, to go and rescue people from a satellite space station crushing out of the sky, and she's just like, oh, this never gets old. She goes outside, finds Mjolnir. Oh, this never gets old. Picks it up, and just whoosh, she's Thor. That was when I read that. I thought, yeah, Jason Aaron gets it. This run is going to just kill it. Maybe that's the wrong phrase to use, but it's just yes. yes, this is going to be good comics. I like it, and a lot of other people. I actually went over to Comics Beat to read like the aggregate of all the reviews for that issue, and everyone was just really struck by just, wow, this run is going to be great, and they were right. It is
Right.
great.
It's a great run from beginning to end.
Yes, yeah. Jason Aaron was the perfect pick for Thor, like straight up. There are very few dud moments in that run, and even the ones that are kind of a dud are necessary, and I'm pretty forgiving of. But yeah, the run overall is just absolute gold.
I remember
Yeah,
when Jason Aaron. So the first pick that I made, which was the scene on the moon. I remember that moment be me thinking, because I've read a lot of Thor.
yeah.
This whole bookshelf right here is
Yes, I've just.
Thor. So, and I was thinking, wow, it's 12 issues in, and Jason Aaron is already probably the third best Thor writer
Mm,
like ever, and we're only 12 issues in. So
yeah,
that,
the God, but
yeah,
yeah, God Butcher was just once I read like in the run up to Thor: The Dark World. I started reading. I read God Butcher and God Bomb. I remember reading that, thinking, yeah, he gets it. He gets this kind of sorry, epic. Um, looks like an epic, almost 80s um, Conan, Frank
mm,
Frazetta era thought like fantasy. That's perfect for Thor. I mean, I'm sure Thor's had that in the past, but this feels like the perfect platonic example of what Thor should be. And yeah,
yeah.
and then yeah,
It seemed to me like the first time too that it felt like super epic because,
mm,
I mean, Walt Simonson and Jack Kirby stuff, they were epic.
yeah,
But you've got things like Thor turning into a frog, which is
yeah,
great. I love it. Which is great.
yes,
I love it. But
yeah.
it
You
is,
need
it is
moments like that.
silly. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, but you
So
do need.
good.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So the idea that Thor, like the thing that people complained about with something like Thor Ragnarok, where they were like Thor should be this big epic thing. The thing
Yeah,
is that didn't really exist until Jason Aaron got on the book.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's yeah. I mean, rewatching Ragnarok recently, I've just struck that it kind of it definitely feels more like a Simonson book, like well, maybe a sillier version. Like obviously, it's much more Taika Waititi. You can tell it's
Oh
very
yeah.
it's got a very kind of silly sense of humor, but it's very Waltz. It's very Simonson and very much and Straczynski as well. Even though he didn't read, I don't think he read either of them in the run up. In fact, Taika Waititi actually said, I read one issue of Thor and was like, not doing that. Like, all right, dude, you're just doing a Thor movie. Why? Okay.
I
But
don't take like I don't take 90% of what Taika Waititi says
he's
seriously
serious.
though.
No, that's like, I've always thought of him as an imp. He's not quite a troll, but he is definitely not. He's not quite trolling people. He's more imping, if that's a word. But yeah, the fact that he actually specifically called the name drops Jason Aaron is really interesting. Like, so yeah, that's the direction he's probably going to go in.
Mhm.
Maybe something closer to Jason Aaron's run, where it's maybe not darker, but certainly more epic and like it in. I don't want to say insane, but yeah, just it looks like something you would like a heavy metal comic from
Yeah.
very 80s heavy metal aesthetic. I can definitely see him going that direction, but funnier. Actually, heavy metal was it definitely had jokes in it. Don't know if they were funny, but they were definitely had jokes in it. And Jason Aaron's run does have a healthy sense of humor, but it never detracts from something quite uh like big epic existential that's always at the center of his work.
Yeah, some of the
Like,
moments in Aaron's run are like really funny, but it's kind of organic funny
yes, yeah,
in the sense that it's based on how they would react. It's
yeah.
like when Odinson calls Jane's ex-boyfriend Walter seller of
Real estate.
yeah, seller of real estate.
Yeah,
Farewell, Walter, seller of real estate.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And when he's and they're often peppered in quite sort of serious moments too, but it feels yeah, like you say, organic. Like that moment I just talked about with Jane getting her cancer treatment. When she comes back and she said, and oh, poor Volstagg, and he says, "Oh, are you done with thine purging?" and and he complains about the hospital food. How do people not starve to death? Where are the healing stones and the wine? And that kind of thing feels very organic and very warm and very in keeping with Volstagg being Jane's best friend and supporter through. I don't know what cancer treatment is like personally, but reading people's description of it, it sounds like torture. It sounds awful. So having a friend like Volstagg just complaining about hospital food and being all jovial and comforting is just mwah, perfect. Chef's kiss.
Love
Love it.
Volstagg.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that'll be one of if I remember, it probably will be one of my moments later on.
I've got the sixth pick for me is so this one I'm picking this one out of spite for some people. It's a retcon for the Mother Storm. It's the
Yeah.
explanation why Mjolnir is able to kind of overrule Odin's enchantment, because there is a sentient storm that lives inside it and it decides who's worthy.
Yeah.
And I'm picking that because I got into it with some troll on the internet at one point who was so mad that a woman was lifting Mjolnir. He was so mad that a woman was lifting Mjolnir, and then he was like, well, it makes so little sense that they had to come up with a Mother Storm explanation. And I'm like, that's what comics is. That's what comics does.
Like, getting mad about lack of continuity in comics feels like the most pointless use of your time. Like, for a long time, Thor was a disabled doctor with a cane, and they were just like, actually, it's more fun if he's actually an avatar that we stuck Thor into, and he's not a real guy. And like, yeah, it's so. I've always just said like continuity in comics is so flexible and fluid that like who cares at this point. But if you can make positive changes, like sometimes changes are silly and maybe not advisable, but something like the idea of the storm being sentient and there's something alive in the hammer makes so much sense. And the idea of it being trapped there by Odin and out of spite, and that it almost seems like the hammer's like out of spite decides that it can refuse him and deliberately picks. And it's like, who can I pick that would piss him off the most? I know, the ex-girlfriend, the little weak morsel who you hate. Perfect, I'll do that.
The one you always hated.
Yeah, the one that you cast out of Asgard and was like, you're not dating my son. Nah, wipe your memories. You could hook up with this milk toast doctor who we're gonna forget later. But Jason, you get the impression that Jason Aaron may have been slightly blindsided by the sheer level of like downright misogyny, but you can tell that he kind of expected it on some level. He's been a comic book fan and writer for long enough to know that that's around. But see, having it be like a deliberate choice of the hammer to be called the Mother Storm, so implying that it's a matriarchal presence, and it deciding, oh, I'm going to deliberately annoy Odin, who becomes kind of the stand-in for all the misogynist comments. Like he's almost like, I wouldn't call it a straw man because these people definitely exist and they definitely believe, or at least say they believe this stuff. It maybe not consciously, but it definitely feels like a deliberate middle finger to these guys.
Pick number 7 to you.
Yeah. Right. Number 7. Again, this was quite tricky, but it's kind of one that's forgotten about because it happens. I wouldn't say it's a low point in the run, but it's a more less remembered point in the run because a lot of it's so focused on this big space setting and the epicness that you forget that a lot of that at one point she has a mission on Earth fighting the exterminatrix and the Silver Samurai, and fighting the Silver Samurai. I'm just picking this because it's quite funny Um, it's just quite quite funny and amusing. But that whole run is also the bit where we find out where those Shield agents have pegged Jane as the new Thor. But there's a bit where she fights the Silver Samurai. Um, Tell them whom, and the Silver Samurai says, "Tell them whomever you're talking to, that it's the Silver Samurai who's kicking your ass." And Jane says, "My ass doth disagree." And then the Silver Samurai does reply with, "Heh, not for long, Sailor Moon." And I have to, like, that fight was just golden. And also I'd forgotten, like, I've forgotten the fight with the Exterminatrix and him and these like the Shield agents being like interrogating Jane, asking her all these personal questions, because at that point she kissed Sam Wilson, and they're obviously in a relationship. Probably not a serious one given what happens later, but like at least dating in the sense. And they were just asking her all these questions like, how, you're faking your cancer, and they're just laughing in their face like, what are you going to do to me? I'm dying of cancer. Like, what do you think you have on me, really? And her also saying like, oh, I'm going to call my lawyer. She's big and green, and you won't like her when she's angry. I'm like, oh yeah. I kind of wish we'd had a bit more time with She-Hulk and Thor together. Like, they only meet to fight at one point, but that implies that Jennifer Walters is her lawyer, and I definitely want to see that story. But yeah, that fight between the Silver Samurai and Thor, that was really good, and it also leads into this whole like mini arc that actually came out in like 2016, and Taika Waititi would have been reading Thor at that point. I'm like, did he read this? And will that play into Love and Thunder, like this whole bit on Earth where where Jane's like fighting Roxxon and Dario Agger and the Silver Samurai and the Exterminatrix? Will that all play in? It does seem kind of bonkers and weird, which is kind of what the direction is apparently. So we'll see, I guess. But it was, that whole part of the run, although it's not as talked about, is a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think also not talked about my eighth pick. This particular stretch isn't particularly talked about. Soon after the reveal of Jane as Thor, and then towards the end when she has to when she stops being Thor.
Yeah.
That particular run is a solid stretch of comics, but it's not that much talked about.
No,
So,
it's not bad, and it's not like people are not talking about it because it's bad, but it's just not as remembered because I think it's probably because it's set on Earth during a run where everything else is just like big epic fantasy space battles, and it feels it's not smaller stakes. It definitely isn't smaller stakes because there's an exploding island. And so yeah, oh man, I love that moment. I love that whole fight is really great. Yeah, the kicking of thine hindquarters.
You mentioned the Silver Samurai, who was an X-Men villain.
Yes, you can tell Jason Aaron used to write for X-Men because they crop up a lot.
Yeah, that's my next pick is because I want to kind of give representation to the fact that we're still in the Marvel universe, we're still in the shared universe, and that can give some really beneficial and really powerful moments. And so the moment I'm picking for number 8 is when both Thors have to fight the Phoenix.
Oh yeah, and she's caught. Like, I don't know much about X-Men, but her being caught in the mind of the Phoenix what's it called? It's called it has a name, doesn't it? I can't remember it. But she's there, and
I'm sure we'll remember it.
Yeah, someone will probably point it out and be like, "How can you not remember?" But again, I don't know much about the X-Men. But
neither do I. But we both know who the Phoenix is. So
yes,
that's how big it is.
Yeah, she when she offers Jane the chance to take her, you can die peacefully, and Jane's like, no, you want to eat the hammer because it's the only thing that will destroy you, and fights her back as as sickly Jane. But yeah, sorry, I'm literally stepping on your moment.
No, I mean
Sorry.
that's just how far-reaching this book goes.
Yeah.
It pulls in from a lot of different places. Another moment that I love, and it's not going to make the top 10, but just wanted to call it out, is when King Thor has to remake the Earth and he's naming the rivers and everything. And so he names the first woman Jane, and he names the first man Steve.
Steve, after Steve Rogers. Oh.
Captain America doesn't show up once in this entire run except for War of the Realms, but
Yeah.
just in that moment, you can tell Jason Aaron has shown you how much Captain America means to Thor.
Yeah. They're really good friends. It's kind of a shame we haven't seen that more, but you get the impression that they're friends, or at least they feel a very strong kinship. And the fact that Steve is worthy obviously means a lot to him. But yeah, we don't see them interact that much outside of it, not especially not in Jason Aaron's run, but just in general. But yeah, that moment of Steve and Jane is just really sweet, and also like later on when she's like towards the end of Aaron's run when she's dying and she's lived for all that time and she's basically become the all mother of like the new mortals. It's just that's again, it's quite existentially, like it really hits you in the existential feels, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's Jason Aaron really I'm glad that he got to see out the long game, which a lot of comic writers don't get to do.
And he jumped out at the right time too.
I think he ended it at a good point. He got his event. He got War of the Realms. Yeah.
Oh, what a payoff too, because he was planting seeds for War of the Realms from the start of the run.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to be too negative about Marvel events. They seem to happen. They used to be once a year. Now there's like 3 in 1 year, or there was up until recently for reasons. But War of the Realms felt like the first one that felt organic, like this was the thing we were building up to. But a lot of them feel like, well, we got to these things cause spikes in sales, so we've got to do them because we need the money. But this one felt like it had grown, and I'm glad Jason Aaron got to see that through, because again, not a lot of writers get that chance, do they?
Yeah, it's not even the creative team on it, because Jason Aaron also wrote Original Sin.
Yeah,
which wasn't.
I reread it for an article I wrote like last year, and it did strike me the whole like the dropping the hammer thing was much better set up than I remembered, but the rest of the event around it felt a bit like it felt like a soft. I don't know if the right phrase, but a sophomore effort, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like a dry run that could have been much better. But it had that moment, and that was a good moment. It's like really hit you right in the feels.
That's actually my one nitpick with this whole run, is the transition from Thor Odinson to Jane.
Yeah.
It's not the best done, just because Original Sin gets in the way of it. It happens in Original Sin, and
yeah, you needed Nick Fury to be there, and him to be the Watcher, Nick Fury. He needs to be there, but the event that got him there could have been better.
Yeah, could have been better. But I think War of the Realms made up for it. So.
Oh yeah, in spades. I think movie Bob did a whole thing about it. Did a mini episode of The Big Picture about Jane, and he said that it was like the Original Sin was largely forgettable. Which I think that's fair.
That's the one moment from Original Sin that's remembered.
Yeah, end.
It's when he whispers it to Thor. Even there's it's also the event that introduced Angela as a member of the Thor family.
Yeah.
And they haven't really done much with that, aside from a couple of miniseries with Angela.
Yeah.
And even that's on the tangent.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of a shame she hasn't gotten another run since. I think she had Queen of Hell and hasn't had one since, which is kind of a shame, because she's actually way more interesting in Marvel than she ever was in Spawn. But whatever.
You know what I love? So we're going off tangent here, but you know what I love about Angela is she's basically a Trojan horse. So she's probably taking a lot of people like me who in the 90s were buying these books because they were they were sexy women, and
Mm.
then now,
They made good.
yeah, you make it this really feminist pro LGBT character.
Yeah,
She's dating a trans woman.
yeah, yeah.
It's just,
An angel, like, well, an adopted angel lesbian who's dating a trans woman who's also Thor's long lost sister. I was like, oh yeah, that'll annoy the right people.
it would
And
annoy all the right people. I love it.
yeah,
It's a Trojan
yeah,
horse. That's what I'm
yes,
saying.
yeah. I don't know if it would have. I don't know how Todd McFarlane would. I don't know if he's particularly conservative on that front, but I think he was just. I don't know if that aspect annoyed him, but if it did, I'm really glad.
I
I
don't
don't
think
know
so.
if it did or not.
Yeah, I
No,
don't think
I don't
so.
think it did.
He
He-
never he never really used her either. Like he kind
No,
of left her up to Gaiman. So
yeah.
I don't think it bothers him.
I mean, I don't remember that run very well at all. I didn't read that. I only read a few of the first trades of Spawn, but I do remember Angela just kind of being like. I got the impression she was mostly there as like, well, her toys will sell really well. And like, yeah, that tracks. Fair enough. All right.
Mhm. I think
Yeah.
honestly she made maybe I'm being generous when I say 8 appearances before she died
Mm,
in Spawn. That's it.
yeah.
So that's one of those things. All right,
Yeah.
we're on pick number 9.
Yes. Oh, this was hard, but I'm gonna pick um the moment in like the Warsaw part. But this was really hard because the whole run is basically gold, apart from a few minor dud moments. But this particular bit, whilst I wasn't hugely interested in Warsaw on the whole, the end really got to me. It really almost made me well up. Like I was sad that this happened to Volstagg, who's like Jane's best friend and support. And then when he picks up him losing all those elf children, first off, how dare you? That's awful. That's so sad. And but when he's been Warsaw and she's trying to fight him and just like she realizes this is the wrong approach, she can't end a Warsaw with fighting him because that's all he does, and she just has to appeal to his humanity. And it's only just this isn't long after she tells Thor finally who she really was this whole time, and he's really angry, and he's trying to come to terms with it. And now that everyone knows who Thor is, well, everyone who's important, everyone who's important knows that it's Jane. She transforms back into her mortal form and just like Volstagg, it's me. I know this isn't you. You're a father. You're my best friend, and you're a good soul. And he calms down, and there's just this panel of giant, big Volstagg bent over and sobbing, visibly crying, and then this tiny little skinny Jane Foster just holding him, just like, oh man, that broke my heart when I first read it. And again, like I get the story reason why. I just don't like it. It's just too sad. Oh, Volstagg, you don't deserve this.
Especially with Volstagg historically, the way he's been treated as comic relief.
Yeah, yeah. He's been the big cuddly, big cuddly dad who just loves to eat, and he loves his always. He's got so many children, he just forgets all their names, and he's just this big teddy bear this whole time, and now he's really suffering, and I don't like it.
It's
I get
mean.
like, yeah, it's mean, but yeah, that's my other like best moment. It's a very humanizing moment for Jane, and it's a great moment just in general. It's just really heartbreaking, and oh yeah, good stuff. Get that sadness in my veins. I love feeling sad. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a pretty brutal fight up until that point as well, and then it ends with this kind of peaceful moment of trying to heal, of starting a healing journey that he never gets to quite manage because of all the things that happen after that. So
It also kind of shows one of the differences between Jane and Thor Odinson, which is that
mm,
Thor Odinson would never come up with that solution.
no,
Like, he would never just try to peacefully talk to the war Thor.
no, he would that wouldn't be his first thought. And like part of his character arc, it's always been him trying to learn how to be humble and try not to resort to punching things at every opportunity. But Jane's always been, because she's been a doctor and a nurse, she's got a much better idea of how to sort of think quickly on her feet and maybe think of a solution that does involve punching every time. And also, Volstag's been her confidant and support as Jane. Then she knows that he's a good, like, she knows him probably in a way that Thor Odinson probably didn't get to, because he'd never been that vulnerable with anybody, let alone Volstagg. So, like, physically vulnerable, like dying and skinny and obviously in pain and very sick. And yeah.
And also, it's as much as Thor Odinson, is a positive role model for guys. He's still a dude. And him and the Warriors 3, when they get together, it's all about drinking. You're not vulnerable until you're drunk. You're not going to open up to them until you've had a few beers and a few pints of mead in you.
Yeah, he's always struck me as there is a bit of a cliche on young comics Twitter about him being a lesbian icon, in that he's not the brightest spark, but he is very kind and gregarious and a good friend, but he's also very quick and very rash to anger, and rash to action before thinking very clearly, which is him being this big, polite, muscly, cuddly dude makes him a lesbian icon, in the same way that a very camp, very overtly sexual character like Emma Frost makes her a gay icon. And I quite like that idea about Dude Thor, but when it's Jane, she kind of fulfills somewhere in something slightly different to that, in that she is quite smart. She's not like Bruce Banner, Reed Richards super genius, but she is very intuitive and smart, because she's been a doctor and she knows people quite well, and she knows illnesses, and she knows she gets what people at their most vulnerable, like when they're dying and when they're very sick. So she uses that knowledge as Thor to solve this situation and to start Volstagg on a journey towards being who he used to be. And that's something, again, like you say, like Thor Odinson would never have thought, because he's never been that, really. Like, he was Donald Blake, but even Donald Blake was a respected doctor and a man. Like, he never got to the state, he was never a nurse. He never saw people at their most vulnerable in the way that nurses do, which is what Jane got to see on a regular basis. Also makes her a good Valkyrie.
He's great as Valkyrie too. So Jane Foster is a doctor, and for me, that's a big part of what makes her worthy. The fact that she saves lives. So there's a lot of people on the internet, like a lot of the people who were against the storyline, were like, she's not even a warrior. It's like, no, he saves lives.
That's the point. Like, the whole point of being worthy, like the reason why Thor Odinson was made into Donald Blake was to teach him humility, teach him what it was like to be mortal and very weak, and like, because he was disabled. Not that I'm saying it's like a physical weakness, like, needing a walking stick to walk around, was a way of teaching a god not to be a dick. And that's what makes you worthy, realizing that being humble, that it's not physical strength. I mean, that's why Steve Rogers is worthy, because he used to be a very sick man. He used to be he used to be chronically ill. He had like asthma, and he was very weak, and that's why he's picked to be Captain America. It's what Marvel does best.
He knows what it's like to be weak.
It's not about being. Yeah, it's missing the point so hard that I can't help but think that sometimes it's just like a lack of reading comprehension. Like, the reason why somebody points out, it's like asking why the reason that King Arthur could pick the sword from the stone was because he was hench, It's like, no, the whole point, like, duh, no, it isn't. The whole point is that he's meant to be a good soul. That's the whole point. Jane isn't a warrior, but it's about strength of spirit and strength of morality and like self-sacrifice, and her being a nurse and then a doctor, no, like, is more than worthy of that. How they're going to address it, because she's a scientist in the MCU, I can understand why people are a bit like, well, how's that going to work? But she has demonstrated, like, I won't go into it because it's kind of boring, but she goes into, like, she is very self-sacrificing, quick to act, and doesn't always act in the most
Safe way.
no, yeah, that isn't safe. She runs into tornadoes, breaks into shield facilities, trusts this strange guy who's landed in the middle of nowhere because she thinks he might help her science, and she bravely goes into a town to rescue people from a giant face laser robot from the destroyer armor. Again, if you just think about it for like 5 seconds, this stuff isn't. But again, because I genuinely think that if you really think that the whole thing about being worthy was being about being a warrior, I genuinely think that you might have a lack of reading comprehension, because that's like the opposite of this whole thing.
a lot of these people have no problem with Beta Ray Bill, Eric Masterson, that kid from the future whose name I'm forgetting.
Dargo I only remember, because again, it's that the reason they're picked, like Eric Marston is an architect, and because he saves Thor's life and he leaps in to save Thor's life, and also Beta Ray Bill is he's suffered a lot, but he's a very good person, and that's why he's worthy. It's again not because of strength, it's because of strength of spirit. Like that's what Marvel does best, is that they pick physically weak, or people with weakness of character, like Tony Stark being an alcoholic, or
Peter Parker.
Peter Parker being a skinny nerd from Queens.
Yeah.
It's like the whole point is that people who are weak get the powers, and people who are vulnerable get these powers, and they have to kind of deal with their own personal demons or weaknesses in order to justify them being powerful. The whole with great power, etc.
Great responsibility. And of course, if they don't have a problem with Beta Ray Bill, Eric Masterson, Margot Couture, but they have a problem with Jane Foster, I think.
Like, what else is the issue here?
I think we know what's going on here.
Yeah, and I think maybe if it had been Sif or Angela, or even Ross Solomon, they might have had less of an issue, because they were all quite physically strong fighters as characters. But it's set up quite obviously in the comics that, like in Jason Aaron's run, that the whole point is that gods and godlike powers makes you unworthy. Like the whole thing of Gorr the God Butcher being right is because gods need to learn how to earn worship and earn respect, rather than just it being given to them. And if there's one character in Thor's circle that has had less respect than Jane Foster, I don't know who it is. Maybe Keith Kincaid, who was basically created as like, well, we've got to give Jane a love interest.
He served his purpose.
Even he was a doctor to the Avengers for a while. Like even he got a better deal than Jane Foster. So
Eric Masterson literally is disabled and cannot walk properly.
Yeah.
It is not a matter of physical capability. So this is one of those things where a woman has to work twice as hard to get the same amount of respect.
Yeah. It's very frustrating. Like you can tell that they're like, they don't want to think of themselves as, well, some of them do. Some of them are quite outwardly sexist and they're proud of it, but some of them are like, well, I'm not sexist, I'm just saying. It's like, change is scary. I get that. But it had to be this character because she hadn't really had the story beforehand, and this gives her a chance that she hadn't had in the past.
Before I pick the 10th moment here, I just want to point out that when all of this was announced, when it said that a woman would be picking up the hammer of Thor and Thor would be unworthy for a while, a lot of people were mad at that because they didn't want Thor to be unworthy. but that's
Yeah.
such a powerful thing. And just the image of Thor Odinson trying to walk around with his axe, Yarnbjorn,
Mm.
trying to find a way to be worthy again. That's a storyline all on its own. And the fact that
Mm.
that I mean, that's what happens, right? Steve Rogers gets replaced. Thor
Yeah.
Odinson stops being
You need.
worthy. It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this isn't the first time or even the second time Thor's been unworthy. Like it happens to him quite, he needs his arc that happens every so often is that he has to learn to be mortal or learn to be vulnerable in order to be a good hero and a good. He's a literal god. Like he is the god of thunder and he needs to learn how to be a good person sometimes and how to realize that he has this not just this power but like existential like control over the lives of mortals, and he needs to be human or vulnerable or unworthy sometimes in order to learn that he's got to keep all that in check. And the fact that and also it leads to the Unworthy Thor miniseries, which is really good. And yeah, and like him being unworthy, yeah, him becoming unworthy or having to learn how to be worthy again is basically Thor's version of like a spider person losing a close family member, like 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 losing Uncle Ben or losing Uncle Aaron or losing Peter Parker for Spider Gwen. Like you have to, Thor needs to learn how to be worthy again. That's just kind of who he is, and I know people are upset about it, but it's like, well, that's kind of comes with the territory, you know.
Yeah, and if you're upset about that happening, you're because it's happened before, you've probably been reading comics too long.
Yeah.
you, Note to anybody watching this who's annoyed at these things, nobody's putting a gun to your head and making you read comics. So
No. Just there's one. I don't want to call anyone out, but I saw one dude who just puts out. In fact, two different places I saw puts out a thing about Jane for every issue, and I'm like, at some point you've got to stop reading this. This is going to give you like high blood pressure, and like if I hate something, I'll just stop consuming it. It's very easy, and you can move on to something that you actually enjoy. But again,
yeah,
negativity attracts an audience, and that helps.
it's insane.
Sucks.
I was the Spider-Man community is
Yeah.
still fighting about whether or not Peter Parker should be married. It's like it's been
Yeah.
12 years, guys. Let's just talk about something else at some point in
Yeah.
time.
I mean, the conversation about the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, like him being the perfect version, you shouldn't do it again. That's exhausting, and I'm only seeing that on the outside. Just
Yeah,
come on, guys, just give over. I can't bear this anymore. It makes you hate talking about this.
it makes me never want to see those movies again.
Yeah, it makes me like, I never want to see a Spider-Man movie. It's like the discussion with Star Wars. I never want to watch Star Wars again because every time I think about it, I'm just like, oh, the discourse. Oh, just take me outside and just end it all. End it all. I never want to hear Star Wars ever again.
In 2020, there are bigger things to be arguing about.
Oh yeah, God, it's just exhausting, and it creates this kind of atmosphere where you genuinely can't tell who's just being kind of a sexist dick and who's being
Who actually
who's
prefers it.
genuinely who's actually got some criticisms to level at the story and wants to discuss it because the atmosphere is so toxic and exhausting and not fun that you just don't want to you don't want to talk about it. But luckily I've managed to block everybody who even remotely says anything negative about Shane. So I've tried not to get into it with strangers on Twitter about it because
There's
I
no
don't know
point.
if you've watched. No, there's no point. It's
point.
you're just shouting at a brick wall at that point. But it kind of makes. Do you watch What They Do in the Shadows?
I have
There's
not
a
seen it. It's on the list though.
no. There's a. It's not a spoiler. I think there's a energy vampire, and he to get like a little snack. He posts troll comments and deliberately wastes people's time so he can suck all this energy. And I'm like, once you realize that that's who these guys are, they are energy vampires in a metaphorical sense. You're like, oh, that makes sense. I'm gonna make one comment I'm going to mute the thread, and I'm going to leave it alone and never look at it again. I'm going to say my piece, and I'm going to walk away. Or not even that. Sometimes just like block. Who cares? I'm
Honestly.
just not going to get into it. Not get. But yeah, once you've realised that, it does make you feel a lot happier. It makes your social media experience a lot happier. Unless they're like members of your
Absolutely.
family,
Yeah.
then you're like, oh god, we've got to discuss this at the dinner table when we next see them. But on Twitter, block. No, you
Block
don't
it.
exist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not worth it. And
No, it
speaking
really
of
isn't.
that, for my
Oh
10th
yes.
pick, my 10th pick, so in the War of the Realms, the only way to get to Malekith's through Malekith's force field is to be a Thor. So Thor
Yes.
Odinson gathers King Thor and young Thor. So it's a callback to that first story with Gorr the God Butcher, and then Jane
Yes.
joins them. That's not actually the
Yeah.
moment I'm picking, but I'm just gonna set the stage for everybody.
Throw it out there.
And
Yeah.
so they all fly in, they all fight Malekith, all four of them. My favorite moment is when Mjolnir comes back to Earth with a new inscription. Whosoever holds this hammer, if they be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. And it feels like such a win. That's a win.
It does. It should have. It kind of feels like one of those things where it should have been they all along, but the moment that where Jane changed it into a she, where the S appears on the inscription, is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like it feels like a great reset moment where Thor has finally come to the end of his arc and he is worthy again in a new way. Like this hammer is a new presence and he can pick it up now, and it feels like the yeah, it feels like he has finally healed and become the god that he needs to be.
It was
You know,
always meant to be.
he's always there. He just needed time away after the God Butcher to come back to it, and now he has. Oh man, that's good. That's good stuff.
So
that whole event, says Chef's kiss. Good event. Like it.
My favorite Marvel event ever.
Yeah, I actually I bought the trade recently because we were just in HMV, and I was like, I've got to buy something. I feel bad for walking into this giant store and not buying anything. And then I just saw the trade of War of the Realms. I was like, well, get that. And it's even better. There is something about reading it in comic book form, like in paper, in your hand, that really makes it just all that much better.
Yeah, because you're a digital reader primarily, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because my nearest comic book shop is like 30 minutes away by train, and its hours are reduced to like 3 days a week, so it's difficult to get comics from there. But so I mostly buy it digitally, which is a shame, but that's just kind of where I live.
It's fine. It's fine. It kind of sometimes looks better on digital. So
yeah. I mean, the guided reading feature on Comixology is really good, although it does kind of rob some moments of their gravitas, but it is good for a focus. If you're like me, who's got like a bit of trouble focusing on some things, it is good for that. So
yeah, the only thing I don't like about reading on digital is the double page spreads.
Yeah.
They don't have the impact that they would have.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's fine. I'm not one of those paper all the way people.
Oh yeah, you gotta use what you can. Although I have been collecting Valkyrie in paper form because I was able to set up a subscription service with Ace Comics, who are like a chain in the UK.
Yeah.
So I was able to get that. I was like, oh, that's okay. And I'm finally, So that's the first time I've collected paper comics in a long time. So yeah. That moment in War of the end of War of the Realms. Me and a couple of other people on Twitter were speculating, like, is Jane going to get to be Thor again? Like, what's she going to look like? Is she going to get? We were kind of disappointed that she had her old outfit, her old armor design, and she didn't get like a badass war Jane Thor armor for her final fight. But it's kind of a niggly, like a nitpick type thing on my part. But seeing her one more time as Thor again definitely felt very satisfying. It felt like a good way to end her arc.
That's interesting because I wish Thor Odinson had been in his classic costume.
Yeah.
Instead of this upgrade.
Yes. I like his look with the destroyer arm. That's is a good look. even if it's a little bit over the top. I do like it. it it looks like a Swedish metal album cover, which
It's
is
the
kind of
best. Yeah.
appropriate. Yeah,
It's
that's what you need from Thor.
absolutely. We have picked 10 moments, but we haven't picked
Mm,
our mutual favorite.
yes.
I'll let you explain it.
Okay, so when this first, I knew it was coming. We all saw it was coming. The issue 704, the setup for this was a look through the life of Jane Foster that she'd never had before, like her as a child, her with losing her mother, then losing her father, losing her husband and her son, and then her finally losing herself, like going off to a something like she knows is going to kill her, like that that setup for what was to come. It already had me in tears. I remember when it came out and it arrived on my phone at 8 in the morning. I was like, oh, I can't read it now, I'll be a wreck. uh, I work at a school, so I had to go into work. I was thinking about it, trying not to think about it. Lunchtime came around. I was like, okay, if I read it now, I will be an emotional wreck because I think I know what's coming. So I had to wait till I get home. I got home. I was like, I just said to the husband, I was like, I'm gonna need a while. Give me a while. So I sat down and read it, and I was crying so much. It is, oh, it's such a beautiful moment. It's set up so well. So Jane has finally defeated the Mangog, and she realizes that no matter how hard she hits him, he won't die. So she needs a permanent solution. So she decides that she's going to, since she, no matter what happens, she's going to die. So she gets the hammer, wraps it around the chains that used to bind Fenris Wolf, wraps it around the hammer, sends the hammer flying around Mangog, so he's tied up, and then throws Mjolnir with the Mangog attached, screaming all the way into the heart of the sun, and both of them just. And that's the end of him, well, for now at any rate, and the hammer. And Thor is, he's angry. Thor Odinson is he's angry, but he realizes that I think I've got it here. You killed Mjolnir. You just killed you. And she knows what she's done, but she doesn't want to. She realizes this might be her last moments with anyone on Earth as alive. So she takes off her helmet. This isn't. This is like the first time in this particular run we've seen Jane Thor without her helmet on. She has taken it off in other parts of the other comics, but this is like the first time we've seen her. And as her armor melts away, as her form melts away, she cups his face. He says, I know not what to say," and she says, "Say goodbye." And then they kiss. Things explode. Her form finally disappears, and she's just Jane Foster again. And the Asgardia breaks in half, and all this debris rains down, and they fall to the moon, and she is gone and lifeless in his arms. And holy
It's a
God,
beautiful moment.
just tears rolling down my face. And I wasn't the only one. And I looked on Twitter to see the reaction. There were just people going, I was crying on the bus. I was just crying and crying and crying. And apparently Jason Aaron was crying when he wrote it. And although the bit where she takes off her helmet, that was Russell Dalterman's idea. It wasn't in the script. He decided for her to take it off.
Really?
So that
I didn't know that.
So we could see her, what she actually looks like without it on. Oh my God, it's so good. And also the say goodbye, that I don't know what to say moment, is a callback to Unworthy Thor, where we see a flashback to when Jane and Thor were together, and she just sort of she says, I don't know whether the gods, like whether they're real or not, whether you're just aliens that live a long time, but you're the kind of god I can believe in. And he says, I don't know what to say. And she says, then shut up, will you? And gives him a kiss. And that's a callback. This moment is a callback to that. And I'm just like, yeah, good stuff. That's a good ending. I mean, it's not the end because, no one dies in comics for long. In fact, that's actually a big point in a recent part of her time as Valkyrie, like death meaning very little. But it felt very final at the time because we weren't sure whether this run would be popular enough that whether this was the end or not. And a lot of people kind of they were disappointed when she came back to life in the next issue, but honestly, I was relieved. Maybe I'm just selfish. I just want my favorite character to stick around longer, but I was relieved.
If you were a betting person before that issue came out, would you have bet that she would have died?
I would have. That's tricky. I don't know. Maybe I would have. I wouldn't have been surprised if that had been like the final end. Maybe I was. Maybe I was hoping a lot and kind of thinking, well, it seems quite likely that she'll come back because from what I could tell, maybe I'm biased, but she was quite popular and the run was quite popular. It did sell pretty well and it was receiving a lot of positive buzz. So I was just thinking maybe they would hang on to it for a little bit longer. But I wouldn't have been surprised if it would have been ended there and she would have stayed dead. But I probably wouldn't have bet money on it, no. But I wouldn't have been very surprised. And maybe for some people that would have been a better, more satisfying ending. But for me, I was like, I just want to see her back. I don't care how. I just want her back. And it was only one issue later. So that must have been, yeah.
I'll confess, I thought she was dying.
Yeah.
I thought she was dying precisely because of what you mentioned earlier, that until this run, she never got any respect.
No.
So I thought that maybe there was this whole plan to kind of give her the respect she deserved, and then she was going to die.
Yeah.
Because there's only one Mjolnir, even though there's actually many Mjolnirs.
Yeah. That, like in the follow-up Thor run, the whole thing is like making all these hammers, just hammer, like tons and tons of hammers. You get hammer, you get hammer, you get hammer. But yeah, there is only one Mjolnir, and she threw it into the sun. And it's gone.
And so it's gone until the moment I mentioned before this, which is when it comes back. That's also my favorite moment in the entire run. I just thought it was beautiful, and I thought she was dead. So
yeah, and again, like I was hoping she wasn't, but I wouldn't have been surprised. I kind of, when I saw the preview for the next issue was her at the gates of Valhalla, I was just like, oh, this might be it. This might be final. But that if I could add like a kind of addendum like that moment where Odin comes to her and just yelling at her like, it was you this whole time, it was you were the one who beat me to you were the one who fought me, and Jay's just standing there rolling her eyes like, oh god, here we go, like the bit that was great. And then when he says you sacrificed everything for us, so he calls her daughter and lets her into Valhalla. I was just like, that made me cry almost as hard.
It's the moment that humbles Odin.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Also, this is another thing for me. Like, a lot of people complain that there's a revolving door in death in comics. It doesn't take away from the impact of that moment. I thought she was dead. So it still hit me really hard. The fact that she didn't end up actually dying, it doesn't take away from the fact that I thought she was dead. So,
yeah, and again, even knowing that was a possibility, it didn't. Yeah, as you say, it's still a very impactful moment. It's very sad, and it's a perfect ending. If it did end there, I'm glad it didn't, but it was still, made everyone who had been following it, and most of the people who I know who are into comics and following that story, it made them cry. I'm like, in a way, it, as you say, it doesn't matter even if you knew for certain that she was coming back, it doesn't take away from it. Like, this is very sad, and yeah, I am glad she came back, and her Valkyrie run has been excellent. Yeah.
Oh, I've really liked the Valkyrie run so far. It's a really good costume too. I like the fact that Jane has had a couple of really pretty good costumes right now.
Yeah, I unfortunately, I don't know why, I reread the old issues where in the 60s when Jane is allowed to be a goddess for like 5 minutes, and she's made the goddess of flight, and she becomes like freaked out because of course she does. But then all these years later, she's got wings. She's a Valkyrie. She's got these big gold wings. I'm like, suck it, Odin. some of the best moments in this run are where Jane just gets to go, suck it, Odin. I'm the goddess of thunder. I got wings and a flying horse to add.
Jane
Make it
versus
even better.
Odin in that fight that you mentioned
Yeah,
in your first pick,
yeah.
when she's like, when you're a 90-pound woman dying of cancer, it feels
Oh
good to
yeah.
punch God in the face.
Oh yeah. That moment was yeah. Jason Aaron's. I think someone called it misotheism. Like he distrusts the idea of gods. That makes this run even better. Like that's a consistent theme that's gone throughout the whole thing, and that makes it all the better. It gives it a very solid like structure and theme all the way through. That makes it just that much more meaningful. Even if like you are a believer, like this idea is explored, and ultimately it comes to the conclusion like you do need faith in someone or something to make you a good person. Jane just happens to have faith in the inherent goodness of people and the gods are people, so she, even though they've treated her badly all this time, she still dies to save them because she thinks she that moment of like why are you doing this, why are you dying for the gods, she says I'm dying for love. And you see these moments of like her baby, I think it's her son in that image, there's like a baby, it's either her or it's her son, and her with her family, her with Thor, her drinking with the All Mother, and she recognizes in that moment it's like these are gods and they have made a lot of mistakes and they are arrogant and um they hold so much power, but at the end of the day they're still people and people can change if we just give them the chance and we can make things better. um so, and she believes in that so much she's willing to die for it. So I think it's like she has to believe that there's hope that people and things can change, otherwise like just give in and
What's the point?
despair.
What's the
Yeah,
point if people can't
things
change?
things have to be, you have to believe things to get better, otherwise like what's the point in doing anything. And like that means more to me now. It always meant a lot to me, but that has so much meaning now. Like things have to get better, otherwise we have to like things have to change, things have to get better, otherwise what's the point?
You may as
Like
well
where do
give
we
up.
go? Yeah, and Jane is just like willing to die for that principle, even if it might be misguided in the case of the gods. Like she still believes it. She's known Thor and she's known the All Mother, and they've been good to her, and she knows that they get it, at least on some level, understand it. So maybe that can change. And then the fact the gods end up on Earth again, they end up living on Earth again,
Yeah.
kind of shows that they all have a chance to basically learn what it means to be humbled and everything.
And
Which is,
Odin does change. And if Odin can
yeah,
change, they all can change.
yeah, yeah. He realizes he eats crow, and so if he can, then the rest of them definitely can. Even Cole Borson gets a redemption arc later on in War of the Realms, and like if he can change, then that's a good sign for the rest of them, isn't it? So
Actually, even Malekith, when
yeah,
in his punishment, it kind of shows that there is a side to Malekith, the young Malekith, that
mm,
is still innocent, and
yeah,
it's still a part of him.
yeah.
It's a
See,
really good message to
yes,
send with
yeah.
them.
Like monsters are made. If we can intervene and stop them being made, that might make things better at some point. And if there's the same with Gorr as well. Like he becomes a bitter, insane god serial killer because he only knew pain and suffering throughout his whole life. And if a god had intervened and actually done something, he might not have ended up the way he did. And that, like,
Yeah.
that's what makes him a really good antagonist and like one of the best antagonists in Thor's canon. Even though he's quite recent addition, he's like one of the best monsters Thor's faced. And it's yeah, even the Jane antis, let's call them, recognize how good that God Butcher run was.
Yeah.
And
Jason Aaron's kind of cemented his legacy with basically two things, and one is Jane as Thor, and
yeah,
the second one is Gorr the God Butcher.
God
Those
Butcher, yeah.
are gonna last forever
Yes, definitely.
in Thor
Yeah.
lore.
Oh man. Yeah. I'm so glad that he got to finish strong. He got to see his run all the way through. Like, I don't know. I don't know whether it was just luck or a good editorial team that spoke up to him, or they just recognised that his work was just that good on Thor. But I'm glad that he got to see it through to the end. And even though, like, I would like to see more female writers writing female characters, he got Jane so much, and he got the story so right that I don't care all that much. The fact that he happens to be a big beardy dude, he gets it, and he got the story right.
You wouldn't think he would be the kind of guy who would be able to write a woman so well.
No, he he definitely reminds me of just like these blokes that I've known. Like I used to go to the pub with. That he looks like the sort of bloke who probably goes out and drinks like homemade beer and makes mead in the top of it in his kitchen or something. And eats deer. Somebody described me. He looks like he eats deer jerky. He probably does. I don't know, but he obviously has experienced enough life and enough real world like consequences and loss that he got this story really right, and he understood it, and he understood why this character, how to make this character meaningful, how to give her agency, even though she is quite a weak, physically weak character. He gave her enough agency that it makes her story impactful and interesting, and that's really all we're asking. We're not asking for women to always be like super strong, although that's cool. We're definitely, I think I speak for everyone. We say we dig that, but seeing someone as weak as Jane still being given a story where she's trying to make the most of what little time that she has left by being a god, essentially, is it's good stuff. Like, that's a classic Marvel story. It's probably the most Marvel you can marvel. Making someone like a doctor dying of cancer into a thunder god that's kind of Marvel's bread and butter. That's what makes it good.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's a good note to end on. So I'm
Yes.
going to give you this space. Go ahead and plug your novels.
Okay, I have 2 novels currently on Amazon. I write under the pen name Rosalind Mosis, so that's Rosalind, Mosis, because Roz Mosis, and one of them's called The Rights of Lemuria, which is an alternate history horror novel. It's kind of Japanese influenced horror novel, but set in a Roman Britain that's still around in the 19th century. I'm quite proud of it. It's a lot of fun to write. And I also just finished a novel called The Leaf-Held Treasury, which is about a young boy with autism growing up in a fantasy fairy realm. And it is totally not reconstituted for fan fiction. And I'll deny it if you ask me. But they're both on Amazon in Kindle and paperback. So and also I'm at Rosalind Mosis on Twitter if you want to find me, and my Jane account is
Talking about Jane.
Talking about Jane. Yeah. I think I miss out the G because we used to be a Let's Talk account, but then we all stopped doing Let's Talk accounts. But yeah, I'm on.
I never jumped on the Let's Talk, so I never jumped on the Let's Talk, but my Twitter bio always said Let's Talk Comics.
Yeah.
Like, well, I guess I kind of was on it without even trying.
Yeah, it was a thing for a while. Yeah, at Talking About Jane, but Talking hasn't got a G. So yeah, if you wanna find me on there. But yes.
And for everybody watching this video, I will have the links under the video. And please click like, share, and subscribe. This has been the Comics Cube with Roz Mosis.
Thank you for having me.